Good morning, it's Shanna. I was sitting here thinking yesterday about decks that I would have wanted, like during certain phases of my life, or that I would have wanted to use, or that I think would have been helpful. I think mostly that I think would have been helpful for those phases of my life. And so I started thinking, like, what deck would I have wanted in elementary school? Which one would I have wanted in middle school? And so on. So then, of course, I had to make like a Google Doc and write it all down. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to make a video. So I think I'll call it Tarot for My Age. That's what I came up with. So if you want to participate, that would be super fun, I think. Be sure to tag it so that I can see it, because I'm super curious what everyone's answers would be. Okay, so to start, I think so basically I've gone through elementary, middle school, high school, college, or 20s, because I know depending on your life you may have done college or not. And then 30s and 40s, which is where I'm at right now. And then I thought I would go a decade beyond and say my 50s. But if you are beyond the 50, your 50s, definitely, I'd love to hear, your 60s or your 70s, or if you want to just make like a and beyond. So I don't think I'll go beyond 50s, just because 50s was hard for me to find any, to kind of wrap my head around anyway. So do it however you want to do it. There's no rules, but that's my loose structure for this today. So I will start with elementary school. If I can grab these. So for elementary school, I think I would have benefited from having the Pixikins inspiration deck. I struggled with a lot of things in elementary school. I struggled with anger issues. I didn't know how to deal with anger, not in a constructive or healthy way. So it translated into, I guess, bouts of crying and screaming and generally throwing myself around, as my mom used to say. I struggled with understanding other kids my age as far as why they acted the way they did. I felt like they were always mean, and I don't think they were really mean to me, or if they were, I didn't ever take it that way necessarily. I wasn't bullied, but I feel like I didn't really understand how to be a friend. So I didn't understand how they were trying to be friends. Does that make sense? Like, a lot of my friends, or most of my friends, I grew up in Utah through my 30s. Well, not through my 30s, until I think I was just 30 when we left Utah. But everyone I knew had brothers and sisters. Utah's kind of a place where you have a big family. Religion is quite prevalent, especially, in the 80s and the 90s. Which the 80s is when I was in elementary school, but I feel like everyone spoke a different language than me. Let's start with that. Like, I didn't understand the concept of teasing, or, I don't know, just generally playing with each other. I don't think I understood the concept of play, to be honest. I'm an only child, and I was one of those kids that always, of course there's always going to be, maybe not so much anymore, but growing up in the 80s, there was bullying and there was picking on kids, and there were certain kids that were always targeted. I was the kid who would stick up for those kids, and so I had this sort of like complex that I had to take care of these kids, and that it was my responsibility to see to it that they weren't picked on, which sounds really like I'm patting myself on the back. But as a kid, that's not, that wasn't my mentality. The other kids just really pissed me off. And I thought it was shitty that they were picking on these other kids for no other reason than they had extra dry skin or they peed their pants or I don't know. There was a kid in kindergarten who was crying. It was a boy and he was crying and he got teased because he was crying because he was a boy. And I just remember being so angry and just this little boy leaned up against the chalkboard and I have this very vivid memory of seeing, this is going to upset me talking about it, of seeing tears going down the chalkboard because he was so upset, and them teasing him was just making it worse. And so my parents were divorced and I would visit my dad in the summer. This story is going somewhere. And he married a woman who, for whatever reason, let her son, who he was like a year younger than me, give or take. So I was probably 8, he was probably 7. But she let him swear. He could say anything he wanted except for God. And I don't know if the F word was really like in our vocabulary at that point. So I came home that summer swearing a lot. So I would swear at the kids at school and I would tell them off. And surprisingly, I never got in trouble. I guess I was smart enough to know that, you don't swear in front of the adults or you get in trouble. So I just had a lot of pent up anger and misunderstandings about the world around me. And I think that on some level, having a deck like this would have maybe felt grounding for me. Being able to maybe draw a card at the end of the day and just being able to breathe through my feelings and maybe putting them into words or at least putting them somewhere other than in my head, I think would have been helpful. Something, with my kids when they were growing up, I always encouraged them, breathe through the anger, give yourself a minute, you can feel it, and then give it words. Like I just, I encouraged my kids a lot to use their words, say what they're mad about, it wasn't helpful for me to not have the words for it. And I wasn't allowed to, or at least I don't remember being allowed to express my anger with words. If I would get angry, I was sent to my room and told I could scream and yell all I wanted, but my mom didn't want to hear it. And, for whatever she was going through, this is not a blaming session. This is just what it was. So all in all, I think this deck would have helped me sort of feel the emotions that I needed to feel in those moments. So that is the deck I would have chosen for elementary school. I'm going to put these away each time because otherwise I have a giant mess and I get super irritated at the end of the video. So, all right, middle school. Middle school was a little different in that I don't remember feeling like I had to stick up for anybody. Maybe it was just because I don't recall having friends that needed sticking up for. It's still very much a theme in my life. I get really upset when people are not treated the way they should. But anyway, that's off topic. Middle school. I was super awkward. I think most of us were. I think if you weren't awkward, you were lucky. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. I didn't know how to dress. I didn't know how to do my hair. I wore glasses for 7th grade. I'm super tall, I'm tall, I'm 5'11", and so I was really tall in school, which, it's just awkward when you're taller than all the boys. It just is. And definitely taller than all the girls. I mean, there were like maybe 2 girls in the whole school that were as tall as me. So, that's a thing. But I remember desperately wanting to hold on to the magic of fairies and unicorns and Santa Claus. Obviously, I knew the truth of these things, but I just remember being sad. It wasn't like a conscious thought of, oh, I am upset that I'm growing up. It was just an underlying sadness that these things were no longer part of or starting to fade, you know? And so I remember the art of Amy Brown. That is not, who is the artist of this? Okay. Linda Ravenscroft is the artist for this deck. But Amy Brown art was kind of, you know, that was a big thing in the 90s, well, or late 80s. I went to junior high, middle school in 88. I'm just dating myself, it's fine. But you know, this kind of style was what it was. And I remember, I can't remember what year it came out. I feel like maybe it was even in high school. But there was a movie that came out in the theaters about these two little girls in England, I want to say. I remember very little. And they found like the body of a dead fairy. And it was just, the whole movie was based on these little girls finding these fairies and, you know, having this discovery. The girls were probably 12 or something, I don't know. But I desperately wanted that movie to be real. And I just remember being sad that it wasn't. And also at the same time, clinging to the hope that maybe it was, you know, and wanting it to be. So I think this deck would have been helpful. I think just being able to, sorry, I have to keep tapping my iPad because I've got notes over here. And I just lost my train of thought. Desperately just, oh, okay. So the reason I think I would have wanted to use this deck, I think being able to communicate with the fairy realm, having this as a resource, I think would have been a really, really soothing way for me to hold on to, you know, that childhood wonder, you know, if you will. My mom was pretty open-minded about, you know, all of this kind of stuff. I was not into any of this in elementary or middle school. It wasn't until high school that I started looking, you know, getting into metaphysical things. But I think if I'd had this in middle school, I think it would have gone a long way to, again, soothe me and give my emotions a place to sit. And I was, you know, again, I was an only child. I was lonely. So I think this would have been a good place for me to explore my thoughts and emotions and feelings, because I'm sorry, like, I don't know any middle schooler, generally speaking, who's going to divulge all of those things with their parents. Even the most chatty of parents, which my mom was not. Again, we're not placing blame. That's not what this is. I just think these cards and these fairies in this world would have gone a long way in helping me feel my feelings. Not to sound cliche, but yeah, I can definitely see me using this as a 13-year-old. And I don't use this now as like an inner child deck or anything like that, but I do feel like I get that kind of that magical sensation when I use this deck. It takes me to a different place in time. So that is the Mystic Fairy Tarot. And I actually just got this deck last year, and it's funny, I went back and forth on this so many times because I think the reason that I started looking at this deck was the Victorian Fairy Tarot that was out of print at the time. And so I thought, well, I'll settle on this one because it's, you know, similar vibe. And I just fell in love with it. It's one of my favorite decks. And I honestly, I kind of struggle with Llewellyn decks for various reasons, which I won't get into right now, but this is not one of them. I love this one, and I'm very attached to it. So that would be my middle school deck. Next up, we have high school. Let me see. So high school is when I started kind of getting into metaphysical things. You know, it was the mid-90s. I graduated in 94. So, all the witchy, devilly movies, they were so popular at that point. And I kind of delved into Wicca, not knowing anything at all about it. This was way before, not way, it was before the internet. There was no Google, there was no Yahoo. So everything that anything that I wanted to know, I had to go to the bookstore, because even the library, I'm sorry, in Utah, I don't think I even looked probably, but the chances of there being any books on the occult or Wicca or metaphysical anything, it was pretty slim. So yeah, and I didn't, at the beginning, I didn't have a job, I didn't have money, and so anything that I wanted to spend money on, I had to ask my mom for. And it's high school. I don't want to go to my mom and be like, hey mom, I want a witchy book. I don't know, maybe some kids can do that, and good for them. And I will say, I think my kids would have been able to do that, because yeah, you do things differently than your parents did. So all of that being said, I picked up a couple of books. I know Scott Cunningham, I think it was probably like The Solitary Practitioner was one of them. I had a candle magic book. There was a magazine that used to come to our house. It was a magazine that you could shop for metaphysical, things like rings or necklaces or I don't know, probably incense plates or stuff like that. And I wish I could remember the name of it, because it was such a cool magazine, and I remember being so excited when it would come, and I would just pour over this thing. I think I got a ring from it once. My mom let me buy that. And but generally speaking, I think this would have gone a long way in just the whole vibe of Wicca, but also high school, in that that's when you go through like your heartache, you find your first love, and you just think that that person is going to be it forever, and then they're not, and it's just gut-wrenching. Like I can't think of anything else that I've lived through that felt the way that did. When I broke up with my first boyfriend, or you had that first fight, or you find out that they lied to you, or you find out that they cheated on you. And yes, I went through all of those things, which, yay. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, because it really sucks when you're 16, 15, 16, 17, going through those things. It's really rough. So I think this would have gone a long way. I think the colorful, young, vibrant, fun, essence of this deck would have been my vibe for sure in high school. I might have wanted something a little more witchy, and I will say my first deck that I picked up in high school from Barnes & Noble was the Mythic Tarot, which, if you're not familiar, it is actually I do have it here. It's a Greek mythology deck. I won't flip through the whole thing, I just want to show a quick peek. This deck, this is not my original deck. I went through a Marie Kondo phase a few years ago and donated the deck, and when I pulled back into the realm of tarot, I found this on eBay and trimmed it, and I edged it, and yeah, I don't really use this deck. The cardstock's really thin, like paper thin, and I'm not super I'm not invested in Greek mythology, so I don't use it, but I do keep it because it's beautiful, and it was my first tarot deck. So anyway, I don't remember feeling particularly, what's the word? Not drawn to. I didn't feel bonded with this deck necessarily, but I loved the concept of tarot, and I will say I do remember being freaked out by the tarot, or the Tower card and the Devil card, because, I didn't understand tarot. I really didn't. I loved having it, and I liked to do the spreads that were in the book that came with it. And, if I did a reading, I would go through the book and look at the meanings, but it was all mostly over my head. So am I in far enough? I guess if we're not, well, it's a little late now. But anyway, this deck I think would have been my jam for sure. I think despite my wanting to be grown up and, teenager shaped, I think I was still very much invested in kind of that middle school feel of myself. And I think this would have been a good place for me to have started. I didn't have, like I said, we just didn't have resources the way we do now, which, that's a whole nother conversation. Maybe we have too many resources at this point, but I think I would have loved this. To be able to come home after school, after having a fight with my boyfriend or finding out that he was dating someone else while we were still dating, I think would have been really healing, to be honest. Not to sound cheesy, but oh my God, it would have been good for me if for no other reason than to explore my feelings and, again, put them into words, make them tangible so that I could do something with them and they weren't just something that was sitting in my chest like a lump. So that is the Light Seers Tarot, and that would be my high school. The deck I think I would have benefited from having and using in high school. All right, let's have another sip of coffee. Maybe every time I take a sip, you can take a sip. And I should have put it in my insulated mug because it's getting cold. But oh well. All right, up next. So this one is either, if you decide to do this, you can either call it your college deck or your 20s deck. I went to college for a couple of semesters right out of high school, like the fall after I graduated that same year. And I don't want to say school's not for me, but in that time of my life, school was not for me. I did not understand myself at all, and I struggled in school. I struggled with studying. I struggled with a lot of things. I had zero concept of who I was or, what worked for me. So I only went for a couple of semesters. So we're going to call this my 20s deck because I graduated high school in 94. Like I said, a couple semesters of college. And then in March of 96, I married my boyfriend. We didn't date in high school. We knew each other in high school. We were part of a huge friend group. And I really liked him. I didn't like him in high school, but he was really sweet and he was funny and he was nice to his mom and he was nice to his sisters. And I thought he was different than the other boys that I had dated at the time. So yeah, we got married really young, and we had our first child in the end of 98. So not quite 2 years. I really wanted to give myself a couple of years to get to know him and have those, honeymoon years to ourselves. So in 98, we had our first kid, which I was only 20. Let's see. I was born in 75. I'm just going to divulge all the ages here. So math, let's see. 95, I would have been 20. So not quite 23. I was 22 when she was born. So I was a really young mom, and because of that, so when we got married, I took all of that metaphysical stuff that I had and I brought it with me to our married house. But somewhere along the lines, I don't remember if it was before or after our first daughter was born, but my husband, who was raised Mormon, he divulged that he was uncomfortable with me any longer exploring anything occult, metaphysical, Wiccan, witchy, anything. At that point, I'd started creating a grimoire, and I had all kinds of things in this book. The internet was around at that point. Google wasn't. It was probably web crawler or something. And I swear I'm getting to my point. But I had a grimoire and I had all of my things and my candles and my books, and he told me he wasn't comfortable with it. And even though I remember being upset and sad. I also remember being a little bit, I don't know that I was nervous that he was going to leave. Like, I don't remember that being something that went through my head, but being young, I feel like being young and growing up where I grew up, I decided to honor his wishes, I suppose, which, God, it sounds so not like me at this point in my life, but I did. I decided to honor, his concerns, and I put all of those things away. I didn't get rid of them, but I put them away and I didn't bring them out. So for my 20s, I think what I would have liked to have had for a tarot deck, I think I would have enjoyed the guided hand. I feel like it's a nice step up from the light seers. It's still colorful. It's still kind of has that sweetness about it. None of it is confronting and I'll get to that in a minute. I think I would have felt like it was a grown-up deck, right? A nice step up from light seers. And here's my point. Something like this would have absolutely been a no for my husband at that point in our life. I think this one would have been too much for him at that point. And this is not criticizing him in any way. We were 20 years old and people are entitled to feel the way they feel, right? And I understand that. I'm flipping through this so fast. Well, anyway, I'm going to flip through it fast because this is not the deck I think I would have had at my house. I think if someone, had shown it to me, I think I would have coveted it, but I don't think it would have been one I'd have at my house. Now, that being said, I didn't use tarot, but if I was allowed, and I'll use that with humongous air quotes, if I was allowed to have tarot and I wanted to be able to get away with it, I think I would have tried I don't have the box, but as I always say, anything I show here, I will link below so that you can find it. I think I would have tried the Guardian Angel Tarot. I think I would have been able to get away with this. Having it in the house, it's sweet, and there's angels. I mean, there's like a little soldier guy. None of them are creepy. They all have like really nice messages. Really, if this doesn't say like Christianity, I don't know what does, which the angels are just really not my vibe, but I love this deck and I think I would have been able to get away with this. And I really, really think my Grams was not into tarot per se, but she was definitely into the occult. Like she had all kinds of, if you're old enough, you probably remember like the Time Life books where you could get like the series of like occult themed books. I wish I knew the name of them. Maybe if I'm feeling extra motivated, maybe I'll try and, insert a picture here of that series. But I think she would have so loved this deck. Like this whole pink polka dot lacy, pink and red, that was so her vibe. And I think we would have had a ton of fun playing with this, and I think she would have gotten a kick out of it. And I think my husband would have he would have relented. Let's put it that way. I don't know that he'd be like happy about it, but I think he would have relented. Maybe. But if he was going to relent on anything, this would have been it. And I still am. I loved being a mom. Like when I had my first child, like I said, I struggled really through most everything until I had my first child. And I genuinely felt, please don't laugh at me, I felt like that's why I had been put here on earth, was to be a mom. Like I'm going to get choked up again, you guys. Wow. Anyway, I'm going to skip over that because let's not get choked up over this. But I loved it. I lived for it. I loved my kids. I was really good at being a mom. And I don't think I would have wanted anything scary, that they would have seen, at least not when they were little. Now, so I would have been really okay with this. I could have pulled this out on the couch while they watched, Blue's Clues, and I could have flipped through it, and I would have felt good about them seeing the pictures and not feeling like I had to have any big conversations with my toddlers. So now that's a different story as they got older, because, things change as you get older. But yeah, I think, I don't know. I mean, maybe he wouldn't have been, because he was pretty adamant about not being comfortable. But I think, how can you say no to this deck? Like, come on, it's so sweet. This one I keep on my nightstand. I know a lot of us have mentioned the same thing. It's kind of our bedtime deck. I don't use it every single night or anything, but if I'm crawling into bed and I want some soothing comfort, at the end of the day, I like to pull this out. It's a nice deck. It's really sweet. I have edged mine and also trimmed it, so it's a little bit smaller. This deck absolutely does not shuffle. It barely overhand shuffles. It's real sticky. I will say, I will link it below, but I want to mention that this deck, there's a lot of fake decks, fake copies of this deck in particular out there. So be really careful when you're buying, if you want to get this deck, make sure you're getting an authentic deck, because I imagine most of us are tarot lovers enough that matters. So if I can get this back in here. And this little stone, I love that. So that would be my 20s pick for myself. All right, so for my 30s, again, like I said, I enjoyed being a mom, and I was a stay-at-home mom for most of their lives, pretty much all of their lives. Housewives Tarot. From the time my first was born until, gosh, it would have been like 2015, I was strictly a stay-at-home mom. That's what I did. We went through different phases of being tight and on a budget, and, sometimes it was a struggle to maintain a budget and do the things we wanted or needed to do, but I felt passionate about being a mom. And at that point, it was kind of the only thing I felt like I was good at. There were other little things, like I said, I was a photographer for a long time, and so that kind of interspersed within those years. But I loved being a stay-at-home mom. I did all of the stay-at-home mom things. I kept a house. Our house was always really clean. I will say, we're not talking when the kids were babies, because that's a different concept. We're talking about when I'm in my 30s. The kids are 8, 9, 10, and beyond. But this deck, I think I would have gotten a kick out of. And I'll be honest, I bought this deck simply for the box. If you haven't seen it, it's really cute. It's got the nice little guidebook. And then it comes with these like recipe looking dividers. Oops, here we go. And I think I bought it for the novelty, because it's really not my style. The deck's not really my style. But it's cute. I like the colors, and I knew that if it went out of print, I'd kick myself, because I was a stay-at-home mom, a housewife for a long time. So, and I think I would have, oops, one moment. I got my iPad just shut off. I have notes on here so I don't forget what I wanted to bring up. I think I would have resonated with this one a lot. I still wasn't using my tarot deck, my original deck that I had, my Mythic Tarot. I still had it. It was in my cedar chest along with, I don't know for sure if I still had my grimoire at that point. And by grimoire, you guys, I would research something, whatever it was I wanted to know, and then I would print it, I would cut it out, and I would paste it in, because I hated my handwriting so much that I loathed the idea of creating something that looked messy. So it actually wound up looking pretty messy. It kind of looked like trash, but it was what it was, and I regret every single day getting rid of that book. We'll get into that in a minute, but This one would have been a lot of fun. I think, the kids were old enough that if there were anything, I don't think there's any spooky cards in here, right? Like, I don't know, maybe the scissors. That guy's kind of creepy. But the kids were old enough that there wasn't anything in here that I would feel worried about them seeing. So this one would have been a lot of fun. And I tell you what, in my 30s, oh gosh, in my 30s, we moved from, I don't know the years, we moved from Utah to Texas. And I found myself making friends, which was something I had never done. Elementary school, I had the friends, we played on the playground, but junior high was rough. I won't go into that. I didn't have friends, not really. I'm lying. I had 2 girlfriends. One that didn't go to church. Actually, one that didn't go to church, which is probably why we were friends. And the other, her mom went, but she didn't. And so they accepted me. And I'm sure, and I'm going to put this out there, I'm sure there were a lot of kids who did go to church that would have accepted me, and we could have been friends. But A, their parents didn't want me at their house. And B, if there were those kids, I never found them. I'm sure they were out there, so I'm not spreading a blanket of church-going kids or anything. It's just, I didn't find them. I didn't find friends in junior high and elementary. But in high school, I found a couple friends. And, but it was the kind of friends that once high school ended, they kind of ended. I'm still friends with one of them on Facebook, though, honestly. So if she ever watches this, hi, Wendy. But we don't ever talk. But it's nice to know she's out there. So anyway, I keep getting off topic. When I moved to Texas, I made mom friends. Like, I went to play groups, and we went to the park, and we did outings, and we went to the mall. And you guys, it was so nice. Like, I had stuff on my calendar, like places to go and people to see. I had appointments that I was making. And at this point, my husband had been promoted in his job. And so we were making a little bit more money. We were a lot more comfortable than we had ever been. And life was a lot easier than it had been, prior to. So I think I would have enjoyed this. I think I would have been able to sit at my kitchen table and play with the tarot with my girlfriends who came over, and their kids could have been in the other room, and if they ran in, again, none of these cards would have been something that they couldn't have seen. So, yeah, this is definitely, this encompasses my 30s for me. So, I love her. But yeah, I don't use this deck. It's not really my jam. But I hold on to it because it reminds me of a time in my life that I miss and that I loved. So that is the Housewives Tarot. And all right, so for my 40s, I'm looking at my notes. Let's see. So for my 40s, I actually did pick this up. I don't know how old the deck is. It hasn't been out for a terribly long time, I don't think. I jumped with both feet into the deep end of witchcraft, the metaphysical, the occult, magic, all of the things in my 40s, all of it. And I have zero regrets because I feel like I found that 20-year-old again. Like, she's, okay, nudity warning, by the way. She's always been in there, and she was just waiting patiently, I think, for me to find her again. So this deck simply doesn't give a fuck. I'm sorry. I hope nobody is offended by that. I grew up not swearing around anybody. It was bad. We didn't swear, but I swear like a sailor. I'm a potty mouth. Generally speaking, I probably won't swear a lot on this channel because I don't find it necessary for myself to do that, but yeah, this deck is the I don't give a fuck. I'm in my 40s. I'm practicing witchcraft. I'm casting spells. I'm going to these rituals. I'm not in a coven. I wish I was. I've been looking for one that fits me, but there are a couple of women's groups locally and somewhat locally that get together, and for all intents and purposes, without calling themselves a coven, I think that's basically what they are. And I've been going and enjoying their company and practicing, trying to figure out what all of this means for me and where I want to go with it. And this deck encompasses that, like, on every level. It's witchy, it's dark, it's moody. It doesn't care what anybody thinks. And not in an angry way. Like, I always, people say, like, I don't give a crap what anybody thinks. And I think sometimes people get the impression that that's coming from a place of anger. And at least for me, it's not. I want to say I'm in a place where I'm starting to feel good about myself or learn about myself. And while I am learning about myself, I feel like I haven't quite stepped into that. I haven't stepped into the crone energy just yet. I feel like I'm at I'm still in the mother energy. I'm not quite 50. I just turned 48, so I'm not there yet. But I feel like decks like this are going to hold my hand as I step into that role. And I appreciate that because I need that, and I'm glad that I have tarot and witchcraft. I don't practice Wicca. That's not really the direction I went. But witchcraft is definitely at least for now, it's the path I'm on and I'm enjoying it. We'll put it like that. I've done a lot of introspection and exploration of myself and where I want to be, as I get older and how I want to be. It's been a good way, tarot in and of itself has been a good way to look at my strengths and really feed my passions. And in case you're wondering, my husband is surprisingly nonchalant about all of this. He doesn't ask questions. I don't really divulge a lot of information to him. I don't know. But at this point, if he were, I think we are both of an age that, one, he would never ask me to stop doing this. And I think he's also wise enough at this point in our life to know that if he did, I would say no. It would be a deal breaker for me. Like, that would be a deal breaker. Because this magic and witchcraft and tarot and all the things has given me kind of a new perspective and appreciation for who I am and what religion means. Now I don't obviously witchcraft is not religion, and I don't subscribe to the concept of religion. But doing all of these things and enjoying the exploration of deities and, gods, goddesses, spirit, all of those things has really given me a new perspective on the idea of God, the Christian God, and why people pray and why they feel the way they do about a lot of things. And I think that's fascinating, because that is something I never would have thought I would have gotten to a place where I could, have that for myself. And so I just think the concept of exploration is really important. Whatever avenue you've taken to explore, I think it's important. And I think it opens the door for more questions and more learning, no matter how you're looking at it. And I think that's really, really cool to sound like a teenager who literally probably never says cool anymore. Nobody says that. Okay, so for my 50s, I had to sit and think about this one for a little bit because, like I said, I'm not quite 50 yet. So I dug around, sat here, asked myself a few questions, and I decided that for my 50s, I think the deck that would be most beneficial or resonant with me would be the Outgrow Yourself Tarot. Oh, let's have another drink of coffee. Yum. So I'm not quite sure that I even feel that, that in your 50s, and this is going to vary for every person, but I don't think that even in my 50s that I'll have quite reached crone status. I'm fascinated by it, but I do feel like, the Witch's Tarot sort of leads into this darker phase of life, and I don't mean darker in a negative way, just more introspective and understanding of myself. And I think that this deck would be a good deck to explore that concept with. I love the messages on this deck. It's lovely to shuffle. The artwork, I feel like this style, and I don't know anything about art, so don't come at me, but this style of artwork seems to be relatively popular, I guess, for lack of a better word, right now. And it's not something that I gravitate toward. But in this deck, it just feels grungy. I don't know, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, just gritty and to the point, and there's just no bullshitting, which I feel like some tarot decks, there's just like kind of like bullshitting, and this isn't one of those. I love this one. It's straightforward. It gives the message. It's punchy. It's to the point. It's not a 20-year-old deck. And I know lots of people in their 20s, this is a deck for all ages, but for me, this is not my 20-year-old deck. This isn't I feel like this might have been too much for me to pull out even in my 30s with the kids. It's a lot. And I use it. Do I use it regularly now? I won't say I use it regularly. I do pull it out. It's one of the decks that I have sitting here at my desk. And the only decks I have on my desk are ones that I'm currently using. The rest are in a back bedroom, in a cabinet, because otherwise I get overwhelmed. But this is one that sits out because I like to use it with other decks. I like to sometimes just pull one of the cards, and I like the message on it to where it's just straight to the point. Like, cruelty is the highest pleasure. Like, yes, that is my vibe. Like, if my husband was sitting here right now, he'd be rolling his eyes at me because that's literally my motto in life. Face your fear, win and give. What you allow will continue. Like, oh my God, like these are things, these are messages I feel like I gave my kids growing up. And I don't mean like, what was that one? Cruelty is the highest pleasure. Like, that's not a message I would have given my kids. But, I'm a straightforward person. I'm very black and white. There's not a lot of room, not a lot of space for gray. There is gray, and I appreciate the gray. And I like discussing the gray. But generally speaking, my day-to-day is very black and white. I'm Sagittarius with, what is it, rising, my moon? No, my moon is Cancer. What's the other one? I'm not an astrology person. Rising sign? I think it's my rising sign is Capricorn. And I've always kind of loathed the concept of that. Capricorns are known, I guess, as being the boring, the bullheaded, the responsible ones. And I've always kind of hated that because it's sort of the opposite of Sagittarius, where it's fiery and wild and loves adventure. But I definitely lean Capricorn. Now, don't get me wrong. I am all Sagittarius, but I lean Capricorn. I am the responsible one. My feet are fully planted on the ground. And I'm not really sure where I was going with that train of thought. But this deck it's the messages. That's what it was. I'm very straightforward. I don't mess around. Like, if you ask me a question, I'm going to tell you the truth. If you ask me if you look good in a dress, I will tell you if I don't think you do. I'll preface it with, I'll help you find something that I think you look good in. And I'll probably also say, but at the end of the day, my opinion doesn't matter. But I'll tell you my opinion if you ask. So that's this deck for me. Express yourself without limitation. There's such good messages, you guys. Like, pulling this deck on a morning, where I'm maybe struggling with something going on at work, or feeling less than. This is just such a good, kind of a punch to the face. Like, look, stop being such a whiny baby. You're fine. People don't care what you do. Do it or don't, but decide and then move forward. And I love that for this deck. So for my 50s, that's what I would say would be my deck. Now, like I said in the beginning, if you are beyond your 50s and you want to take it further, if you want to take it to your 60s or your 70s, or if you just want to say, if you want to have one more grouping of beyond, that would be cool too. So I will leave that up to you guys, but that is my tarot for my age, and I would love to see what you guys do with this, if you do. So tag me if you will, and I have stuff I have to go do. So I'm going to leave it at that, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for sticking out through the rest of this. Bye.